Hi everybody, welcome to our webinar on fixed assets in Dynamics GP. Today, Diane Sider, Turnkey's Senior ERP Consultant and Quality Manager, will show how Fixed Assets module can help you gain better insights for decision making and will enable you to quickly and accurately record, track, depreciate, and analyze your company's assets. Also joining us today is VP of Accounting at MTN Inc., Jill Hennigan, who will discuss how utilizing this module has helped their organization. Please submit any questions you have throughout the session, and we will address as many as time allows towards the end of the webinar. I will now hand it over to Jill from MTN.
Hi, this is Jill Hennigan. Thanks for having me. We implemented the fixed asset module in Dynamics in January of 2014 and have been using it ever since. We found that the user interface is very easy to use and understand, navigate through. It's all a very logical process with regards to fixed assets. It also has a very good audit trail of asset movement and disposal, and we can process those very easily. Another thing that we have found to be very helpful with the fixed asset module is to not only track our fixed assets that we have purchased, but also any that we have under an operating lease. So we have them at zero cost and have all the lease information included in the module, so we have a good record of 100% of our equipment regardless of the financing structure. We also use the refreshable Excel reports within the module to quickly get a full listing of our assets and to understand depreciation, book life information quickly. We also like that depreciation is very easy to run. It does not take much time at all at month end, and it's really kind of a push of a button and posting to the general ledger, and it's done. The other perks of the module is to have the integration manager that we can use to add a large number of assets at one time. So if we do have a big bulk purchase, we don't have to key each one individually. It can be uploaded easily. And then also asset account level assignment. We can book things to specific plans and locations using that function. So overall, we've been very happy with the fixed assets module within Dynamics and look forward to this webinar.
Well, thanks, Jill. So my name's Diane Sider, and I am going to walk through a demo of fixed assets, and we're going to look at several things here in depth. So our agenda for the demo is we're going to look at the purchasing to fixed asset process. We'll walk through a payables transaction and then also a transaction that originates on a purchase order. Then we're going to look at some all the asset fields that we can enter information into for accurate reporting. We'll look at depreciation expense and the different tax books that we could have set up. We'll also look at running depreciation and the GL posting. And then we'll finish off with some retirements and mass changes to our assets. And then hopefully we'll have a little time left over for Q&A before we hit 3 o'clock. So, on to the demo. All right, so here I am in GP. I'm in GP version 2015. I know, Jill, you guys are on 2013 still, correct?
Yes, we are.
Yeah. So a few things have changed since then, but not many. But anyhow, just because I'm sure some of you are not all of you are on 2015, I just wanted to mention that that's the version that I'm looking at today. So I'm going to hop over to my purchasing. Well, first I'm going to talk about real quick. So when we set up fixed assets in GP, one of the things that we can do is we can assign one or several fixed asset purchase posting accounts. And what these accounts are, this is like a trigger account. So anytime I use this GL account in a payables transaction, it's going to flag that transaction as a fixed asset or capital purchase, and then part of that information will flow over to the fixed asset module. So my one trigger account is 1590 here. And so typically this is like a CIP or a WIP account that all the purchases go into, and then as the assets are placed in service, you would go in and set them up as an asset, and it will reverse out of this WIP account. All right, so I'm going to hop over to purchasing, and I'm going to enter just a straight payables transaction so we can look at how this looks. So I'm going to pick my attractive telephone company, and I am going to purchase a server. For $12,000. So nothing much has happened yet. I'm going to change this account to 1590 because that's my fixed asset clearing account. And I'm going to click post. And I'm not going to print any of my posting journals. Okay, so at this point now, if I hop back over to fixed assets and go up under cards to my general window, you notice I can either click on the drop down here and I see here's my purchase for $12,000. I can also view it by clicking on the purchases button up at the top. Here's my $12,000. So it's now ready to be added as an asset into the fixed asset module. So we're going to come back to that window, but before we do, I want to walk through entering an asset via purchase order. So back to my purchasing window. Now I'm going to select purchase order entry. I'm going to pick the same attractive telephone company. And I'll pick an item. I'm going to pick the server here. This time I'm going to buy 3. All right, so it's not quite an asset or a capital item yet. For purchase orders, I have to click on the blue arrow here, and then I have to check capital item here. I can also change the account, but it's checking that capital item box that really creates the fixed asset from the purchase order. So I'll save that. And from here, I'm just going to receive an invoice all at once so that we can get it over to that module. And of course, I picked a serialized item, so I'll enter the serial numbers. All right. And I'll post this after I enter a document number. All right, so again, I'm not going to print my posting journals. So now if I hop back over to fixed assets, and I do the drop down here, you notice now I have 4 on the list, and here's my latest purchase. That's the purchase from the purchase order. And again, if I go up to the button, You see I have 2 receipts and then 2 payables transactions here. So from here, you have a choice. So we've done our purchases. Now we're ready to set up some assets and get ready to place them in service. So you have a couple of options when pulling asset information in from the purchasing module. Option 1 is to use this drop down, and I'm going to pick our $12,000 server. You notice that from the payables window, the description server has populated here for me. I also have the acquisition cost, which is the original vendor invoice date, and then as well as the acquisition cost here. If I click on the blue arrow here, it actually takes me into where I can see who the vendor was, the the voucher number, payables transaction number, GP assigned. So from here, then I would select which asset class to assign this asset to, and then I would click Save. You notice GP will auto-assign my numbers for me. So that's one way to enter or get an asset in from purchasing. The other way is to actually pick the class first, and then you can go up to the Purchases button and select that way. So the difference is, here and I'll show you, is if I go to the Purchases button first without first selecting a class, I can check the box, but you notice my Select button has been grayed out. So to use the Purchase button, I have to select the class first and then go up to the Purchases button. And now my Select button is green and I can actually select it. So you notice from the purchase order, what pulls in is this was the item description that I had selected from my inventory item list. Again, acquisition date would be the vendor invoice date, and here I have an acquisition cost and a quantity. Because I ordered 3, I've got a quantity of 3 here. So at this point, I can set up one asset for all 3, or I can break this particular purchase order out into 3 separate assets by actually changing the cost here to, let's say this one was $85,000. So because I reduced the cost of the purchase order and made this $85,000, once I click Save, once I pick class, what happened? And click Save, you notice if I go back to the Purchases button, this is still out here now. This was my original PO, 198,000 minus, or 192,000 minus the 85,000, 128,000 left on it. So you can take one PO or one payable transaction and split it into multiple fixed assets. By the same token, I can also combine multiple, there's my, so here 107 left. I can combine multiple purchases into one fixed asset. So you can do either or, depending on your business process, how purchasing is, handling the purchases of assets versus how you guys need the information in your fixed asset module. You notice again the quantity does update with this. So I'm going to save that. All right, so let's go back. I'm going to go back to my last, not that one, I'll go here. So let's talk about some of these other fields on this asset general information window that you can use for reporting on your fixed assets. So you notice first, of course, we have the asset ID. We can set GP up to system generate these so that they auto increment for you. We have our asset classes. Asset classes are typically, they go along the lines of your balance sheet fixed asset accounts. So here I've got automobiles, buildings, computers, equipment, furniture and fixtures, and then trucks. That's how my balance sheet asset structure is. So those are the classes I have. We have a description field. You notice it's red and bolded, so that means it's a required field. I have to have a description for my asset. You also then have an extended description. Sometimes these fields aren't long enough and you want additional information, so you can definitely add it on the second line. Then you also have a short name. Some people like to group their assets by short name. Again, it's a field available for reporting and in smart lists. We have the asset type. So typically by default, it's set to new, but you can also set up assets that are used or leased. Again, informational purposes, for reporting. Property type, again, defaults to personal, but you do have some other options. The other one that's used semi-frequently is the amortizable. Then we have our account group ID. So account groups are similar to the asset classes. So you notice I have 4 set up. If I drill in here, the account group is where we set up our default GL accounts for each asset. So these can be overridden. As Jill mentioned, you can assign GL accounts to assets at the asset level. However, if we can have at least the main account default from here, then all you would have to change would be the division or department if you needed to in your system. I'm going to go back here for a minute so we can look at some of these options. So GP uses a little bit different terminology than what a lot of people are used to related to fixed assets. So let's talk about the different account numbers here and what each one does. So first we have depreciation expense. Obviously that's going to be your P&L depreciation expense account. Depreciation reserve. Depreciation reserve in GP is really your accumulated depreciation. So here I have my balance sheet accumulated depreciation account. Prior year depreciation. You notice this, in my case, is the same as the depreciation expense. So what GP will allow you to do is capture depreciation expense related to a prior year in a separate account if you need to do that. Most people don't, and they put it in the regular depreciation expense account. Next, we have the asset cost account. Again, this is your balance sheet asset GL account. We have our proceeds account. In this case, mine is set to a cash suspense account, and here's why. Because if I do a retirement in GP and it's like a sale of an asset, I can actually put the proceeds amount, the amount that I've received from the buyer for the asset, and GP will do the journal entry to my cash suspense account and the gain or loss account. But then what happens is, for those of you that use the bank module in GP, you have to do a bank transaction then to take it out of the cash clearing and into the cash account. So that's why in my case I'm using a cash suspense. And then finally down here we have the clearing. We have the clearing account. And so what happens here is as I add assets in the fixed asset module and click Save, GP is going to want to generate a journal entry, and the journal entry takes my new asset addition and it takes it out of or credits my 1590 clearing account and then would debit my asset account. So that's why it's listed here. So on top of those fields, we also have several fields down in this lower section that a lot of people tend to use. First one is our physical location. So this is a list that you can build. In this case, I'm representing like building 1, room 100, building 1, room 200. So I'm getting specific with which building and which room within the building my asset is located in. A lot of people use physical location. They may use their department or division or something as a physical location, just so that people know which department or division it was assigned to. We have an asset label field. So if your IT department has labels that they place on your assets, you have a field that you can enter that information into. Here we also have a structure ID. And again, this is an optional field. In this case, they're using the structure ID as their department. You have a custodian field. The custodian field is actually a list of your employees. These employees would be set up in the payroll module in GP, and then you could actually assign inventory or the physical fixed asset to a particular employee. So if you have a lot of remote workers and you need to assign laptops and headsets and everything, you could assign them and tag the employee here. We have the manufacturer name field, and then if I click on the blue expansion arrow, I have a field for serial number, model number, and a warranty date. So again, the warranty date is for informational purposes only. It doesn't create any kind of transaction or anything, but you can run a report on it. So next, on this side, we have location ID. And location ID is different from physical location because this is actually your city, state, county designation. And so location ID is typically used for personal property tax reporting. And so you would just create a list. Then again, we have the quantity, which we looked at a little while ago. We have the last maintenance field, so you can put in if this asset, if it's like an automobile or something and you want to keep up with the maintenance on it, you can enter when it was last maintained. And then the date added. The date added is always going to default to whatever date you've entered that asset into the system. And then finally, up at the top here, we have master asset ID. And so what this field is meant to do is it allows you to group several individual assets into one master asset, or a lot of people use this like a capital project. So you can have many assets, but they can all have the same capital project ID up here so that they're all kind of grouped, and you can run a report and show me everything that's in a particular capital project. So from here, I'm going to use my Go To button window, and I'm going to go to the asset book. And so the asset book, you notice I have three options here. I've got my internal book, and then I also have tax books. This is where GP is going to show you the life-to-date and year-to-date depreciation amounts that have been taken. It also shows you the depreciated to date, so 6/30/2017 is the last time I ran depreciation. But when we're setting up an asset, the important fields to look at are the original life, which will default, and then the depreciation method and averaging convention. So let's talk about these fields, and we'll just go in order. Placed in service date. This date is going to default from the original vendor invoice date / the acquisition cost from the general window. You can override the placed in service date, because the placed in service date is the date that GP will start depreciating this particular asset. So if, for example, you know that this asset that I purchased isn't going to start depreciating until July, you can enter a July date in there, and then it won't start depreciating until then. The other field on here that you can override is the cost basis. Sometimes, you notice again, by default, it's going to pull the acquisition cost from the general window. But sometimes, especially for your tax books, the cost basis may be a little bit different from the actual purchase price, and so you can adjust that here. Then GP is going to show you, it calculates the yearly depreciation rate and then the current amount. And then again, once depreciation is run, it's going to show you year-to-date, life-to-date, and your net book. It's also going to show you the remaining life of the asset over here. And then for assets, you have a bunch of different options for depreciation method. So you've got your standard straight line, which a lot of people use obviously for their internal or corporate depreciation expense. But then you also have your declining balances, and we have amortization, remaining life, acres, so. And then even no depreciation. So sometimes people set up some assets that they don't want to depreciate. It's more like an inventory list, and you can absolutely do that as well. So after depreciation method is the averaging convention. And so the averaging convention tells GP how we're going to calculate the straight line depreciation method. So full period or full month is going to depreciate regardless of the actual date of the month that this was placed in service. It will take a full month of depreciation or a full period of depreciation. Some people like to do next period. So I place this in service in February. It doesn't start depreciating till March. So you have several options. You've got another popular one is the half-year option. A lot of on the tax side, tax reporting. And then you've got your mid-month as well options. Finally, you have the switch over. So you notice right now it's set to no switch, but I also have straight line. So if my depreciation method up here is set to anything other than straight line, then I have to change my my switch over to straight line. And so what happens is, because a lot of the other depreciation methods don't fully depreciate an asset, there could be a little remaining value left. And so GP then requires you to flip, or it will switch over to straight line so that the asset does fully depreciate when it needs to. So you have a few more options here. We've got our special depreciation allowance that you can change to yes. So this would be for bonus depreciation on our tax books. And then you also have, if I click on the ITC button, this is where I can enter any Section 179 expense. So again, you could set up, the advantage of having multiple books here is the internal book, in my case, is what hits my P&L each month. That's my internal depreciation expense. But then I can also have various tax books, and you notice for the same asset, each tax book could have a different depreciation method, a different averaging convention, and different life. You can actually have different cost as well. So these windows are all independent. Each textbook is, can be different. So let's go now. Okay, so I've entered some assets here. Actually, let's go back for a second. Not there. Oops. I didn't set this up as for the book. So I'm going to do that really quick. So you notice everything defaults in when I don't really need to change anything. I can if I want to, but I don't need to. I just need to click Save. All right. So now we're ready to run depreciation for the month. So I'm going to go down to my routine section here on the financial page, and I have two routines that I will run at month end. I've got my depreciate and then my GL posting. So first I'm going to run depreciation. I'm going to, by default, leave it to depreciate all assets. I'm going to pick my target date is going to be 7/31/2017. And so I'm just going to run this for my internal book. I'm not going to worry about the tax books at this time. So I'll just click depreciate. I get a nice pop-up. Do I want to continue? Yes. And so you notice you get a green toolbar, and then once the window changes colors, you know it's finished. So I've run depreciation. As you can see, it doesn't take very long, typically. And so once I run that, I want to run my GL posting. And my GL posting is what actually triggers a journal entry to happen. So without running the GL posting, no transaction or batch has really happened yet. So you notice my batch ID will default. My posting date I can change because this is July now. So what I always recommend when we run the GL posting is I always like to leave my from field blank or at zeros. And here's why. Because sometimes you add assets, and based on the placed in service date or whatever, if I put a from field, I could be missing something. Something may not get caught, and then that asset sits out there and just isn't dealt with properly. So I always recommend leaving the from field blank. And then the to field, I'll pick my period 7. I'm going to insert, and I'll click process. So here I am. I have this journal entry that's been created You notice the source document out to the side here. Here's my new addition for $12,000. So you notice it's debiting my asset account, crediting my clearing account, and then I have FADEP. These are my depreciation expense that's running. So once you're satisfied with this, and you do have a print button so you can print it to review it on paper if you want, you click Post. Now the thing I've found when you click Post here is you do not want to interrupt this process, and you want to wait until this report actually pops up. If you try to close the window before the report pops up, the batch doesn't fully complete and people run into issues. So this is what it will look like. So once I post it here, where does it go? It goes up to financial batches. And so here, you see I have a couple out here. I don't post much. And so here's my batch, the FATRX, and here's my description that I typed in, July depreciation. So I would post it here, and then it would update the GL. So that's our depreciation and GL posting processes. So let's talk for a minute about retirements and some mass changes that we can do. So now I'm moving up to the transaction section, and here's my fixed assets section. I'm going to click the retire button, and I will grab an asset to retire. So you can do retirements individually. You have to put a retirement date. So I could say, and then you have to pick a type. And most of the time, well, you can pick whatever you want here. Obviously, if you're going to pick sale, then it's going to expect a proceeds amount. So I would pick something like mass retirement. You do have this retirement code field here as well, and this is a list that you can build yourself. GP doesn't come with any pre-existing codes, but these are meaningful perhaps to you guys, and so then you can again run reports on the different types of retirements that you guys have done. So when we retire an asset, we have the option to retire a quantity. So if in the asset general window the quantity was more than one, I could say just retire one of two or whatever. I can also retire a portion of the asset by picking a cost. So let's say the original asset was $12,000. I could retire $6,000 of it, and it will only retire half the asset basically. Or I could retire a percentage. If I don't want to retire the entire asset, I can say retire half of it. Here's where I would put my cash proceeds and any expenses and non-cash proceeds. And then again, GP will do that journal entry for you. So that's to do it individually. You notice I also have a mass retire field down here, which brings me to my last topic I kind of wanted to talk about, and those are the mass change fields. So a lot of people mass change assets, for things like assets are found in a location and then that location is closing, so we have to transfer or move all the assets to a new location. We can do that through this mass change. I can also mass retire, like I said. So if, we're getting rid of a bunch of stuff, instead of doing it individually, I can mass retire a group. So the key to using the mass change, mass retire, and mass transfer is I first have to create the group of assets that I'm going to do a mass change to. And so I would go here to the Select Assets window, and I would create a group. So I'm going to say New Group, and I'm going to, let's say I want to find all the assets that are in Atlanta because I need to move them. So I'm going to create a group. So you notice down here I have my list of assets, and I can go and kind of figure out which is which and pick them individually, or I can do a search. And I can say, show me by location ID is equal Atlanta, Georgia. And I can click the search button. And now GP has done the work for me, so I don't have to think too much. So once I have my group of assets, and I click OK here, now I can come down to one of these mass options and make a mass change to that set of assets. So I can come to mass transfer. So let's talk for a minute the difference between mass change and mass transfer, because both are similar. You have a lot of the same options here. So difference being, mass change will take the group of assets that I just created, and let's say I want to move them all to a new location. I would just pick, they're all going to Chamblee. I would say apply changes. So the mass change will do, obviously, move the assets from Atlanta to Chamblee. The mass transfer will do the same thing. However, the mass transfer actually keeps a log because I have a transfer date here. So I could say on July 19, 2016, I moved this group of assets to Chamblee. So you can make a change from either window, but the transfer window will actually create an event, and so you'll be able to look up, here's where it was, here's the new location. Whereas the change just changes it and doesn't keep a historical tracking of it. And then we have the mass retire. Again, same thing, I pick my list and I can retire that group of assets all at once. So in Jill's intro, she mentioned a few reports. And she mentioned that they use the Excel refreshable reports, which is a really good option for people that have a lot of data in their system. The Excel refreshable reports will run, because they run kind of outside of GP, they're a lot quicker. Sometimes Smart Lists can slow down when you've got a lot of information in here. So for fixed asset reporting, a lot of people really like the Smart Lists or the Excel refreshables because you can get a lot of information out, and obviously then export to Excel. Auditors love fixed asset lists in Excel. So that's one kind of reporting option for you. You also have GP canned reports, and there's several here for you to choose from. So just depending on what kind of information you want, we have our annual activity report, which if I go run this, this is going to be similar to an asset roll forward report. It's in a little more detail than some auditors like or need. But there's that one that people use a lot. You have the fixed asset to general ledger reconciliation report. That is also a good one. So let's just create this, and I'll print it to the screen. And I'm printing this, you notice, in detail here. So let's look at what this is. So this gives us, by GL account, here's a list of all the assets that are under a particular asset account. So you notice I have something in my cash suspense account, and the source is a FA retirement, so that makes sense. On down. All right, so we've got about 10 minutes left, and I wanted to leave a little bit of time for questions. So at this point, does anybody have any questions?
It doesn't look like anybody's... Oh, wait, here we go. We got a question. Sorry, the question went away.
Maybe they changed their mind.
Okay, here it is. What if you need to capitalize an asset after the purchase was completed?
Okay, so that's a great question. Okay. Sorry, I was hearing an echo for a moment. So, good question. So, let's say, you know, the AP person coded the transaction and just hit an expense account or hit the asset account directly. So you can still set that up as an asset in GP. The only difference is going to be that instead of using this purchases button or field up here, you would just enter the asset manually. So I would just come down. Again, my asset ID is going to populate, and I would just have to type in you know, all of the information off of the invoice. So I would have to look up or figure out, see what the vendor invoice date was, and then the amount of the asset. So you can definitely just set it up manually. The one thing you'd want to be careful of here is you'd want to go to the accounts assigned to this asset and perhaps change the clearing account, because again, once I add this asset, GP is going to want to do a journal entry to take the asset out of my clearing account. And so if AP didn't use that clearing account, we'd want to make sure that this account was changed to whatever account AP used when they coded the invoice.
All right, we got another question. Can prior year's assets be imported to GP fixed assets?
Another good question. So, so yes, prior assets, we import them all the time, because a lot of people, you know, have been using an other, you know, Excel, or they have another system that they've been using. So we do convert assets all the time. And when we import, we typically use Integration Manager. And the only difference being, when we import the assets in, we always bring in, let me pull up this, we always bring in the, sometimes year to date, depending on what time of the year we're actually implementing fixed assets, but always the life to date depreciation amount. So we take your assets at a point in time and we say, okay, for this particular asset you've depreciated, you know, this much. And then GP will pick up and just start depreciating the remaining amount. So we'll tell it you last depreciated through a particular date, and here's the amount you've depreciated so far. And then GP will pick up from there.
Okay, now this person wants to know if they can change the default averaging convention. When they currently add an asset, they have to go into the book and change from half year to none. We changed this past year.
Yes. So, right here under the setup window is where all of the defaults are set up. So the book class window is where a lot of the defaults are. So for example, I'm going to pick my internal book and I'm going to pick for the building class. So you notice here is where the default depreciation method and averaging convention pull from, as well as the life of the asset. So if you change it here in the book class setup window, then going forward, any new assets you add will have this new averaging convention assigned to it. It won't go back and update anything that has previously been added to GP. So to do a mass change for assets already placed in service or whatever, you would want to come up and do a mass change to your assets up here. But going forward, you can change it under the setup.
That was actually all of the questions that we had submitted. We made some good time. So if you have any additional questions or if you'd like to watch the recording, please contact your account manager or Michelle Geeby at 636-237-2261. And thanks for joining. Have a good rest of the day.